Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote-unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to queue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have my friend Adam Apollo here with me on the show. Adam is a designer and physicist who built the Resonance Academy for Unified Physics in collaboration with a past guest on the show, Nassim Haramein, which is aimed at educating the world on the science that proves the intimate interconnectivity of our universe. Adam also helped to launch unify.org, which helps coordinate global synchronized meditations and has unified 10 million plus people in over 150 countries worldwide to date. Adam, hello. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Brandon. It's an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, man. I've been looking forward to this ever since we had the pleasure.
Ever since I visited your starship there?
Yeah, exactly. Ever since you came and helped to navigate the starship that one evening, I've been looking forward to it ever since. And that's funny. I want to start with my same opening question. That is my super predictable opener is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Helping people to find their true gifts and removing the blocks and programs within them that have kept them from knowing themselves fully, deeply, and completely. Because I believe that everyone following their deepest purpose and path in life naturally brings us into a highly coherent, unified, and harmonic planet. That all of the greatest changes that we need to make in the world are simply based on people facing their own shadows, accepting themselves fully, and coming forward with the gifts of who they are to share with each other.
Bam. I call that the Willy Wonka answer because you're like, the elevator continues past the 10 floors and you blasted us straight into outer space. And I think I'd be disappointed had you been the other end of that. Some people, it's like a one-word answer. And I'm like, okay, we have 9.5 floors to go, but I'll take it.
Love is the key. No, I mean, I'd love to have a Wonka-vator.
Me too, man. I'm definitely more the Wonka-vator answer kind of person myself. So I get it. Oh, man. So why don't you start by sharing a little bit of your backstory? And, you have such a diverse, you've done a lot of cool things. I mean, I didn't even kind of touch on all of them there in that little intro. So maybe, if you would give us as much context as feels relevant.
Yeah, sure. There's always different ways to approach your life story when you've had a lot of journeys and experiences. And so for me in this moment, what I feel called to share is that, I was a pretty scientific and highly questioning kid. I challenged everything in every classroom that I was ever in. I made straight A's and was valedictorian as a freshman in high school, but But I was also sickened and sort of disgruntled by the nature of the school system and education and the way that it's been formulated, and felt that so much of what our kids are being taught and what I was taught are frankly lies, or misinterpretations, or weakly westernized sort of tinted views on history. And they say history is written by the victors, and that's very, very true.
Right.
When we really look at the kind of tales we've been told, and a lot of them are also shaped by religious inclination, especially Christianity in this country. And for better or for worse, the way that people think and the way that we see things as they are in the world, in many ways, has become filtered by these programs that we've had installed into us during our times growing up. And I, at some point, noticed that I had a bunch of programs and they really, really sucked, and they were making my life miserable. And I went through this powerful process where I just started questioning everything, all the way down to the roots of my existence. And somewhere in that flow, I discovered, um, through practice and through this experimentation with a friend, that I have this human energy body, that I have this field around me.
Mm.
And I felt it between my fingers doing this little experiment where I put my fingertips together and really slowly separated them and looked at the space in between. And when I saw this sort of fluid, smoky charge flowing between my fingers, it was like a lightning bolt hit the top of my head. And I
Right.
suddenly knew that I had found something that had a key to all of these locked doors in this long hallway that
Mm.
I'd been walking down my whole life, going, is this it? Is that, how is this possible? Why is it that you can feel it when somebody's looking at you from across the room? How is it possible that you think of somebody and they call you on the phone? How
Right.
is it possible that, and on and on and on, all of these mysteries and questions, which we don't get answers for,
Right.
in school. We don't, it's not part of the framework of our teaching. And so I was like, well, who the heck knows about this? And, this was in 1996, and the internet was really blooming at that time. GeoCities was a big thing.
I remember
And
that.
you remember GeoCities?
Yeah.
And, so people were making their own websites, creating their own information databases. And I started exploring, and what I found was that my own personal experimentation of the qualities of this field around my body wasn't just something that only I had discovered, that actually it was called chi in Chinese, or ki in Japanese, or prana in Indian, or vital life force, and I started finding all of these different resources where people were sharing about this and talking about it in ways that, for a 15-year-old kid, were pretty exciting, because they
Sure.
were discussing how things like magic are real things, and that we have this sort of connection and communication with the forces of nature around us. And I realized a lot of indigenous spiritual traditions around the planet all come from this lens, that you're in kind of a constant communication with the great spirit, so to speak, or with the elementals, with the field around you.
Right.
And I got highly curious about that. And I started really wondering, why isn't any of this in our science? Like, if it's such a direct experience that I can have, that anybody can have, and you can, whether you have experienced your chi and your prana or not, or you've thought you've not, you can any day of the week. Just go to a tai chi class, and if there's a good teacher, he'll show you, he'll
Right. Right.
zap
Right.
you, and show you that this is real. And so I was like, why isn't this in our sciences? And so I started diving into sort of all the leading edge scientific paradigm studies that I could find, and made my way from Einstein's general and special relativity, through the work of Max Planck, through early stage quantum mechanics and Heisenberg and Schwarzschild and all those guys, and made my way up to Lee Smolin and loop quantum gravity and the quantum gravity sort of revelations and revolutions, and then string theory and all of that. And I literally spent, the last couple of my years in high school mostly learning and studying on my own, way more than I was getting in school, because I was just devouring these books on physics and philosophy and trying to put together the pieces of what is this picture of reality that we are in. And fortunately, I was in such a powerful revelatory sequence where I was realizing these keys before I even found them in books. And then the books would just confirm what I had seen or experienced, that I was able to begin to assemble an entire unified field theory and an understanding of exactly what the mechanisms are that connect consciousness to the fabric of space-time, how quantum gravity actually works, how we can look at space-time from a quantum gravitational perspective and see how it works at scales of the small all the way up to scales of the large. And I began to understand the origins of all of the forces and the dynamics of our reality that we're embedded within.
Wow, that's pretty impressive for a high school kid. I think I was still like pooping my pants or something.
Well, I was still doing keg stands and weird, shit like that too. But smoking a lot of weed,
Right, right.
But it's for me. It was like the most exciting thing would be to like sit by the river for a little bit, stoned, and contemplate the nature of the universe and begin to really see and feel what's going on out there, and then to play with it,
Yeah.
and as I played with it, that's when I started to really get to know the Jedi arts and how to be a ninja, and that like getting in touch with the field, the energy, the flow of time and life force around you is the key to mastering nearly anything you could ever want to master, you want to put your mind to, because it's about a relationship between your being and the universe around you.
Right. And so, did you go on to study physics and quantum physics in school? I mean, in college, or like how did that journey lead you to like Resonance Academy? And that's
Yeah.
such a robust undertaking to build something like that.
Yeah, for sure. My senior project in high school was called the unification of science and spirituality through unified field theoretics.
Wow.
So I was definitely taking a big bite out of the mystery.
Yes,
Um,
you were.
and I went into college with the level of sort of integration of study that I'd had at that point, but found two things. One is I wanted to do 3D design and actually do 3D animations of how energy moves in the body and what it looks like, and really show people that. But I found that the multimedia department and the college that I went to at UNCA was like nowhere near close enough to do pulling that kind of stuff off.
Right.
The physics department, like even the best physics stuff I was reading from Stanford, from Harvard, etc., like these guys were so far lost in the abstractions of quantum chromodynamics and the abstractions of quarks and leptons and like color theory,
Mm-hmm.
that like they were just way far away from like fundamental space-time dynamics. And so the guys that I'd studied, like Lee Smolin and Roger Penrose and a lot of these guys working on quantum gravity theory, those guys I were actually the ones closest to the gold, so to speak.
Right.
And no colleges were actively teaching that work, because it's beyond graduate studies. You know what I mean? Like you when you go into college, you have to go kind of take the step-by-step journey all the way up through the structure of physics, and that journey is full of a ton of landmines and distortions.
Right.
So I started on the path, I went down it, and I focused a lot on specifically the physics of light and visual phenomena and the physics of sound, because vibrational studies, I think, reveal more to us about the nature of sort of the harmonic field that we're embedded in than anything else. And studying frequency and light and sound reveals keys and harmonies and mathematics that you can't get anywhere else, and so, I went down the road in college for a bit with physics, and the more I, approached the road of quantum mechanics, the more I found that the standard model of quantum mechanics was extremely faulty, and that the structure that has been the kind of the foundation that we've been building a lot of the physics off of over the past 50 years or so, or 70 years, I guess, is just, it's just got serious problems. It's got a few major assumptions that disconnect us from the actual fundamental field and the sort of classical mechanics of space-time, the way it moves, the way it flows, because we're assuming certain things based on particle acceleration physics and so on and so forth. And I mean, I could go off on its problems for days, but
Right.
But in that process, I was investigating other physicists who had similar thinking to me, and trying to find people that had really good insights. And some of those included Dan Winter, who I found in high school, who had some brilliant insights about compression and its relation to the phi ratio, the nature of the heart, the nature of love. Like, what is it that actually causes gravity, brings us together? And eventually I came across Nassim Haramein's work, and Nassim, I looked at some of his papers on spin, and he was applying torsion, like fluid physics, to Einstein's field equations. And I was like, yes, man, that's what's up. Like, the universe is a superfluid. Like, we're in this field, it's moving, it's spinning, it's not static.
Right.
And I knew he was on the right track. And so many, many years later, we became friends. We were speaking at some of the same places. I became really close friends with his partner at the time, who's the mother of his children, Amber. And eventually, we got kind of lined up more and more to work together. And he was breaking out some epic papers, and I was speaking at the White House and UN, and I found a funder to help fund some energy research he was doing, and got him a bunch of money, and then basically got a grant back from that, in collaboration with the board members, and ended up building this Academy for Unified Physics, because I wanted to build education systems, transform our approach to education, at a collective level. And my first company since 2003 has been focused on transforming education and that kind of thing. And went about building the Resonance Academy for Unified Physics. And because because of my own work in that space, I wrote a lot of the physics in the delegate program, especially all the real bridge hardcore physics that connects, the modern physics sort of standard perspective to how we can perceive the universe through this unified lens.
Wow. Pretty incredible. Quite impressive. Yeah, I actually had Nassim, as I mentioned, on, guys, if you want to go back into the archives, episode 111, this is like episode 1100 and something, so a long time ago, but I mean, not that long ago, considering I do 5 episodes a week, but right. Yeah, it's been a minute, and you guys can go back and check out if you're not familiar with Nassim and his work, and so it's really cool to kind of hear how how you guys ended up kind of coming together. So I guess there's so many directions we could go with this. One of the things that instantly comes to mind is you hear a lot about, so many references to the Matrix these days. And, we live in the Matrix, and it being one of my favorite movies of all time, and probably many people listening. And I'm curious, what is all these years now of close study, diving into physics, certainly a lot more than the average person. What is your sort of latest theory, or how would you best, summarize your latest theory as to, what's going on, who we are, is this a holographic reality? Are we in the Matrix, etc.?
Yeah. Well, some would say, I can't tell you what the Matrix is.
You must take the red pill.
Experience it for yourself, right? It's like hands you the red pill. But that's not exactly true. And as we unfold our experience of this reality around us, we can communicate about it. We can share about how it works and what its fundamental mechanics are. And, one of the things that we find in the Matrix movies that's somewhat profound is where Morpheus says, the Matrix is a prison for your mind. And it's a very profound statement because it implies that, this construct of reality to some extent is in some way limiting you, or is in some way constraining you,
right,
to believe that things are a certain way when they may not actually be that way. And my sort of shattering of that glass would be to say that it is not actually the Matrix that's a prison for your mind, but that mental ideas, belief systems, and programs, they can be prisons for your mind.
Right.
Because they actually keep you from actually understanding and knowing what the Matrix is, right? So it's almost like you have programs in place to keep you from understanding the nature of the actual universal program, right? And it's not that knowing about the universal program is bad or good or etc., but it's that, the lens of certain philosophies and certain religions on the planet have sort of tilted towards looking at the universal program a certain way, and that there's a good way to look at it and a bad way to look at it. And a lot of the ways that have been expressed as bad ways to look at it become these sort of unconscious programs.
Right.
And one of those is related to this idea that I spoke of briefly, that magic is real. And if you grew up in Catholic households or whatever, you probably heard at some point the story that magic is something that witches do, and witches are
evil,
workers of the devil, and they're evil. And you've probably, even without that upbringing, you've experienced Halloween if you're in America. And you have this idea that there's these wicked witches, and they're like, but then we just kind of make this whole myth around them, and we put them in all the scary movies, and it's just this whole thing. And you don't realize that actually, wow, that's actually a lens that I'm putting on a peoples that were indigenous to Europe, who had spiritual traditions that let them work with the plants and the animals in the land in such a way that they learned how to communicate with the plants in order to make medicines. And the remedies that they created and generated actually are the foundation of most of modern medicine.
Right.
And that, these especially women who in particular had fantastic techniques with herbalism and healing techniques, and I think probably far beyond even just with plants, but actually working with the field, working with elementals in the body, very similar to Chinese medicine,
right,
which is now widespread and very well accepted. And you go get acupuncture and all of that. That's all based on moving elemental energies or charges in the body through the electrical system of the body. And you have these people that we called, that the Roman Empire called barbarians in the middle of Europe, who's, in my ancestry, absolutely, who were believed to be evil sorcerers and witches and being slaughtered simply because they had this power in this relationship, and that power was threatening to the Christian church, which was trying to indoctrinate people and grow the Roman Empire. And then, of course,
Right.
also became a factor later. So we may have one story about something, but we may not actually see all the sides of that story. And this is really the nature of this matrix that we live in, is that it is in many ways conditioned by the prison of our mind. Our mind creates the cages that we're either thriving in or not.
Right.
And so what the matrix actually is we are emergent in a unified harmonic matrix of light that's all around us. We are actually this expression that's coming out of and through this field, and we're designed in such a way that we have interfaces with this field. And whatever we choose, whatever we think, however we judge, influences the way the field operates.
Right.
And so we're constantly creating a feedback loop with the universe around us.
Yeah.
If you walk into a party and you're scared of how people are going to see you, and you're super self-conscious about the clothes that you're wearing, then what's going to happen is, as you're at that party, more and more people are going to notice your clothes.
Yep.
Because you're putting so much focus on that, you're actually pushing that out into the field, and it's hitting everybody's electromagnetic mental field, saying, oh, look at their
Informing
clothes,
them.
look
Yep.
at their clothes.
Yep.
Like it's a powerful thing when we walk into a space and we radiate with what we're choosing, intending, and thinking. And so there's many, many layers to this exploration of this unified field. But it's fractal, it's holographic, it's harmonic, meaning that, it's not just local, that what happens at small scales also occurs at big scales.
Mm-hmm.
What happens inside of us also happens outside of us. Inside of any part of our body, your hand, your eye, your toe, you have a holographic reflection in that microcosm to the entire body and everything that's going on in your whole body. And we have this sort of harmonic layering to us, where we're like music. And just like music, we can play at many different octaves and many different paces. And, we get used to certain kinds of music and certain kinds of fields, and we roll with those. And then sometimes we don't realize it, but we've actually just been completely not hearing and ignoring or judging some other music. And because we judge that other music, we can't even see or relate to the people that listen to that music. And so we have to discover that we're all in this flow of songs and music. And the more we can open our bandwidth to actually receiving and hearing all the different ways that the universal song plays, the more we can see of ourselves, and the more we can see of others, and the more of the big picture actually comes together into its perfect harmony.
Beautifully said. I love that whole perspective on the matrix, and in sort of flipping it and like, oh, it's actually, it's actually a light matrix, as you, I think, put it. And the only prison is the prison that you self-construct.
Yes.
And that's so much more empowering than some of these ideas of, oh, we have been enslaved and embodied in physicality as some form of punishment, and you've got to find your way out. It's like, no. Yeah. You came here, intentionally to learn how to thrive within this particular environment.
Yeah.
That's what I believe.
Yeah, we're all met with there's a lot of programs out there that are blame programs, that are shame programs, and that are victim programs.
Yep.
And it can seem liberating to gain a piece of the truth, to think, oh my God, it's being done to us.
Yep.
And Yeah, on some level, that's true. There,
Yep.
there are things that are done to you.
Yep.
There are things that have hurt you. There's people that have had bad intentions in your life. And yes, that's there. Absolutely.
I
And
frame
it's
that as like
okay.
relative truths. Like, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. But
Yeah. Go
you
ahead.
know, I frame it as relative truth. So it's like from one
Yeah.
perspective, it's being done to you. You can
Yeah.
see that and make an argument that like, oh, he just did this thing to me, and we
Yeah.
can quantify that. But from another perspective, from another vantage point, it is self-created vibrationally.
Yeah.
So both are true depending on the vantage point from which you're speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. I mean, we create what we experience. Um, but the really powerful transition that I see people go through is when we can both acknowledge how the responsibility
Mm,
behind something. Like, we have to acknowledge that peoples came to this continent, in North America I'm speaking of, and moved across the continent, stole land from people, slaughtered people, and that a lot of the land of the United States is stolen land from indigenous peoples who lived here. We have to acknowledge that. We have to really look at that, right? But we're not those people, right? So I'm not that person who came
hmm
and took that land.
Right.
And so at the same time as I have to acknowledge the responsibility of the peoples that did that, and I have to account for that, I also have to account for what I'm going to do about it right now. How am I creating right now? And to do that, to make that change, you have to step out of the victim story, because being in the victim story of you hurt me, it never is going to fix it.
Right.
Right. But by being like, actually, I understand that you did this, and I understand that you created this pain, and I understand that you probably created that pain from your own trauma because you had your land stolen from you,
Right.
and you had lords coming and sending soldiers and raping your people,
Yep. Yep.
then. And I can see the longer trail of trauma and the
Right.
trail of shadow that's led us to this moment. And now we have this opportunity for reconciliation and healing,
Yeah.
and we can actually weave that sacred hoop back together through that acknowledgement, through that like responsibility of saying, okay, how do we make this good now? How do we create something good with each other now, to
Right.
resolve this now, to be in the truth about everything now? We're not going to deny what happened anymore. We're
Yep.
going to claim it. We're going to acknowledge it. We're going to be responsible for it. And let's change things now.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the empowering vantage point and perspective to take. It's like, okay, we're here. What do we do to move forward? Knowing that's what's good for you is good for me. Knowing that, even if I did something to you 5 years ago, I was a different person than I am now. So,
Yeah.
how do we
Yeah.
move forward? And is the question.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as from the physicist perspective, we talk a lot on the show about, the ultimate nature of reality and source, and the idea that we're, all, fractals of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. And so I'm curious if, how do you, that's sort of my way of explaining it very in a nutshell. What is, how do you answer the question, what is the source of consciousness?
Yeah. Well, to say what the source of consciousness is like, trying to look into the mirror all the way into the like infinite reflection inside of your eyes, reflecting back into the mirror and reflecting back and pointing in that direction and saying, I'm in there. Like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm there. I am. And so while we can't necessarily say this definitively, this idea, this thing that I can point to, this is the source of consciousness, what we can see is how consciousness emanates in and through this matrix of space-time and reality that we're experiencing.
Right.
And we can say that we can relate to each layer of this reality by getting in touch with the different vehicles of consciousness that we have. Some people call them chakras. I call them interfaces to space-time.
Mm-hmm.
But as you get to know them, your each of your interfaces have a certain way of regulating the field. So like by getting to know your root chakra, you begin to understand that the dynamics of your physical experience is elemental fundamentally.
Mm.
That the balance of heat or fire and cool or condensation or water, and fluid movement, and the balance of air, breath, the way that oxygenation flows through your blood and your body, and earth, the way that your bones are being built, your mineralization, the structure of your tissues, like that, all of the processes and things in your body really come down to processes that are solids, liquids, gases, plasmas, and dynamics of those, and that your consciousness can actually relate to those different elementals and change the configuration of what you feel in your body and what goes on around you. And so gaining an understanding of the source of your physical consciousness, of
Mm.
what it is actually to experience the physical world, gets you in touch with sort of the key codex of the ray of creation, so to speak, of the unfolding fractal holographic field, that is particularly designed for us to have that relationship with space-time.
Mm.
Similarly, as we develop the source of consciousness around our sacral chakra and get to know our emotional field, we begin to understand all of the different emotions as vibrations on a spectrum. And we learn how to harmonize different vibrations by meeting them with their counterparts, by, harmonizing up an octave or down an octave. And the more we play with music and light, the more we begin to understand how emotions move and harmonize. So many of us know deeply and innately, when you're watching a show or a movie, the music is driving your emotions. So even if, on screen, there's nothing scary that's happening, when the music twists a certain way, you feel it. And it's like, whoa, this is it gives you anxiety. You can actually feel that something intense is about to happen. And this is the way the sacral is working. It's constantly interpreting the flow of vibration in the field. And it's going to tell you when you walk in the room if it's got a good vibe or a bad vibe,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so learning how to work with that vehicle is essential. The same way with the mind. The mind is the solar plexus and the capacity of will and intention and the structural unit that helps us to develop the appropriate containers in which the charge or the energy or the vibrational flow of emotion, current, emotion, energy in motion can flow. And so that you can think of the mind as like the geometries that the light is passing through, like a prism that's changing the way that the light is flowing and changing its direction or spreading out the spectrum or filtering certain things and not other things. And the flow of that, emotional energy then also in turn affects the elemental vibration in your body. So when you change your mind and you change your beliefs, you change your ideas about something, you change how the emotional field can flow through you. And in turn, your body actually changes. And so it's really important that we come to really get a hold on our minds and the way that we think. Realize that sometimes our mind goes off in ways that are very unhealthy to us, and learn how to steer your mind back to the truth, steer your mind back to thoughts and beliefs and systems that are empowering to you, that reinforce your health, that reinforce your strength, that reinforce your capacity. If you've ever studied how Olympic athletes train, 90% of the training is mental. It's literally building the mental pathways in your head, forming the crystals that can focus their energy in the experience enough so that their body can do it, and it's in a state of flow.
Mm.
Right. So the canyon's already created, the the bobsled track, is already made
Yep.
in your mind.
Yep.
And then all you have to do is ride it and
Yep.
feel it and surrender to it.
Right.
And this is why in martial arts, you teach form first, train people in form, and then they learn how to feel the way the energy moves through that form.
Before we continue on with today's episode, for those of you interested in getting more fantastic fungi in your life, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about a friend of mine's brand new company, The Great Mother. Recently, I have been drinking The Great Mother's superfood mushroom coffee alternative called Ritual, as well as regularly taking their awesome Ally microdoses, and I am truly loving both. As you probably know, these days many of the world's highest achievers and performers swear by microdosing. The problem is it can still be difficult to get a hold of magic mushrooms. That's why when my friend reached out, who lives in an area and country where legalization is not a problem like it was in the past, and said he'd be willing to offer microdoses to my listeners, I wanted to pass the word along. Ally microdoses are 100% organic. And in addition to a small amount of the magic active ingredient, they also contain functional mushrooms like lion's mane, cordyceps, chaga, and other brain boosters like bacopa. Ally is essentially a full spectrum nootropic. And of course, the coffee alternative Ritual doesn't contain magic mushrooms, but it has an array of the best organic functional mushrooms in the world. And, with functional mushrooms, it's really important to get them from the highest integrity sources. And whereas some other highly popular mushroom coffee alternatives on the market only contain a few varieties of functional mushrooms in their actual ingredients, Ritual has 7. Not only does it contain more types, it also contains 3 to 4 times the amount that the big brands have in each serving. And it tastes amazing. I actually like to have it on its own, as well as mixing it into my coffee sometimes as well. However, since this is definitely a unique offering, there are a few steps. First, just reach out and request to follow the private page, thegreat.mother on Instagram. Once you've been accepted to follow, just message what you're interested in getting and someone will get back to you. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, even if someone has no knowledge of any of this, it's like, sort of like the law of gravity. You don't have to understand how it works for it to affect you if you jump off of a cliff. I think of my grandfather was a state skeet champion. My dad and grandfather in Virginia, where I grew up, and my grandfather, that was his sort of technique, is he'd picture the clay pigeons, breaking before he shot them, and he was the farthest thing from being aware of any of this stuff, but it works, whether or not you are. I always say with all of this sort of stuff, like the evidence sort of speaks for itself when you start applying some of these concepts, and it's very good insight into consciousness there. And one of the things that I think of all the questions that really fascinate me, when speaking to someone who's studied physics and physicist perspective like yours, I'm curious what you think about. I've always said when I grow up, I want to be a time traveler, and so I'm curious, what you think about time travel and the possibility of it. And of course, if it's possible, then it stands to say that they're here now. And what are your thoughts on time travel?
Yeah. Well, to understand time travel, we need to understand time, which means understanding space-time. And when we look at space-time, there's a few things that, like Einstein's insights and a few others, have given us about the nature of this field that we're in. And one is that it moves and flows, it curves, and when it curves, light travels with it. And also that when we are experiencing things that are outside of us, the further away from us they are, the further in the past they are from our perspective. So, for example, if I'm looking at a star and it's 4 light years away in the sky, then I'm actually seeing that star right now, but I'm seeing the star as it looked 4 years ago.
Right.
And this is something that is a pretty simple concept in science, but we don't really apply it to our direct observation that much, where we're like, oh, wow, I'm actually looking back in time when I look at the
Right.
stars.
Right.
Like I'm literally in the furthest stars that I can see, I'm literally looking thousands and thousands of years back in time, because there is an actual moment that that star is in, that I'm receiving the light from it. And that exact moment was a moment in the past here on Earth.
Right.
And so that's one of the ways we can observe time and realize that everything outside of us is in the past to us, in the way that its light is traveling to us, its
Right.
information flow is traveling to us. But that doesn't mean we can't access information outside of us in the now and what's happening in that location now. It's simply that the light current, in other words, like the ripples through the ocean of the field of space-time, have a delay. And so we
Right.
pick up ripples well after the earthquake happens, so to speak.
Right.
But as we know on this earth, like whenever there's going to be a big earthquake and tsunamis, the animals know.
No.
The
Right.
animals
Run
move,
for high
they run,
ground.
they get out of the way.
Yep.
They can tell that it's already coming before the thing even happens,
Yep.
before there's even any tremors. And so there is a simultaneity to the way we can pick up information through the field. We don't require the speed of light as a transmission space, to transmit information to us. So those are some kind of important fundamentals. Now, when we look at the experience of time, one of the things that we come to realize is that as we move through our lives, things happen. And when those things happen, sometimes they're things we really don't like and we really wish we'd have done something differently. You ever done something really, really stupid and you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe I did that. And at the scale that, like, years later, maybe even 10 years later, you still think about that and you go back there in your mind and you're like, man, if I had only done that differently, right? Like I
Right.
have quite a few of those from middle school and high school,
Right.
where it's just like, geez, oh my God, I can't believe I did that.
Me too.
And sometimes we even, will go back and obsess around it, where we like imagine doing the thing differently, and we imagine, interacting with that girl in a different way or whatever, having this entirely different branch of experience. And we imagine how that experience would have gone. And we see like what kinds of things would have happened after that and how that would have changed how people would have looked at us and all of the stuff, right? And we get down the line and you could keep going, but the problem is you're never going to reach now from that branch. You actually can't reach yourself right now from that branch of energy. And so I find a lot of people actually end up wasting a huge amount of time and a lot of energy creating a false timeline, a fake timeline in
Interesting.
their minds of something that is the way things that happened. And they almost convince themselves that that's the way it happened because they don't want to look at the way it actually happened. And so, and this is the nature of lies as well. Anytime you tell a lie, you're trying to keep that lie going. You're on this branch, and that branch is disconnected from the actual flow of the timeline that you're on. And so all the energy that goes down that branch is energy that's literally wasted as long as it's separated. And then what happens is that it builds up tension with the timeline that you're actually on. So the further out the branch goes, the more and more tension there is to pull it back, to connect back in, because it's kind of like pulling a rubber band. Like you can use your muscles and you can stretch it and you can keep stretching it, but there's a point where you can't really stretch it any further. It's either going to break or your muscles are going to give out and it's going to contract again. Energy wants to come back to equilibrium. And the only way for energy to come back to equilibrium and balance itself out when we've created these false timeline branches is for eventually it to snap back, collapse in, the truth to come out about the lie, and the reconciliation of the whole thing and what actually happened to merge into the moment. And when that happens, all that energy that's been wasted basically slams back in.
Right.
And it is intense, right? Like, I mean, anybody who's told a lie for a long time and had to face the truth probably knows exactly what I'm talking about here.
Right.
And also, you know, this is true of our great historical lies that we've told ourselves, the
Hmm.
branches of history where we've been telling a false story for hundreds or thousands of years. And eventually, the truth about our past comes back in. And, you know, this one is really interesting because it's happening right now in a huge way
Totally.
around pre-cataclysmic civilizations. The truth about what happened in Atlantis, the level of knowledge that we had, the level of capacity it took to actually build the pyramids and build these megalithic structures, the level of connectivity of civilization, the height of the technology. I mean, it's amazing. Like, two of my colleagues, Alan Green and Robert Grant, you know, have definitively discovered that the foot, the meter, and the cubit are actually not separate measurement systems. They're actually part of one unified measurement system that existed before the cataclysm,
Wow.
and that they were just rediscovered, or portions of them were rediscovered, but that the nature of these three forms of measurement are actually embedded in the Great Pyramid. They actually are embedded in the relationship between the sphere and the cube, like literally the volume of a sphere to a cube that surrounds it is the relationship between the cubit and the meter.
Hmm.
And the relationship of the cube that surrounds a sphere that has a cube inside of it, one edge of that cube to the following surrounding sphere is the relationship of the foot to the meter.
Wow.
And it's not a coincidence that 1 foot plus 1 meter plus 1 cubit equals exactly 6 feet.
Hmm.
And the story goes on and on and on and on. But we're discovering these key codes to the past that hold this higher level math and higher level sciences that we didn't even know existed, but are hidden in sort of the metaphysical and spiritual mathematical traditions, and root studies and geometry studies of all of these different cultures around the world. And we wonder, how do they have all these similar things? Well, it's because they were part of one civilization prior to that. And so this brings me to time travel, right? So how do we know for sure? How can we get there? Well, the flow of experience is such that if you go back in time through your life and you work your way back to your birth, and then you go past that, where do you go? Where
Hmm.
does consciousness stop?
Hmm.
The reality of experience, as we know, is that it doesn't cease. It doesn't There is not a stopping point. And what I've found, and what, millions of people around the world have found, and hundreds and hundreds of people that I've studied with this phenomena, is that there's actually memory and experience that we have within us of direct experiences that we as individuals have had, that goes back far beyond the time that we are in this particular cellular construct that we call our body right now.
Right.
And that the information that's available to us when we travel back down that line can reveal to us truths about different cultures, about the history of the earth, about the nature of different civilizations, about, I mean, shoot, how to cook, how to do sword play, how to do calligraphy. I mean, you think about all of the things that you may have studied at different periods, at different points,
Right.
in different times, and to not be interested in bringing that knowledge into the now
Oof,
is
crazy.
is like, it's like ridiculous. It's like the universe just said to you, "Oh, by the way, you studied martial arts for 40 years in a past life. would you like to receive that information back into your body now and know how to do all of that now? Like, you're like Neo
Right.
sitting on the Nebuchadnezzar or whatever. And he's like, do you want to know some martial arts? And he's like, yeah, and he
Download me.
jacks him in, and it's like, boom. And he's like, I know Kung Fu,
Yeah, 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 totally.
it it literally is like that.
Yeah.
If we connect with the tools that we had in other lives, and we connect with the feeling of what it felt like to be that in that moment, and we accept the way it was, as painful as it was, as glorious as it was, as horrible as it was that our family got killed or we killed somebody or whatever, if we can just accept the flow of time for as it is, because we're not going to change it.
Right.
That's the one rule of time travel. You can't change it. You can go back to the past all you want in your consciousness, and you can look at it, you can observe it, you can receive it, you can accept it. You can receive the river from upstream, but you're never going to change what happened back then, because if you did, you're never going to reach the now again.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only thing you can do is accept what has happened. And
Yeah.
when you do, it's more glorious and more beautiful and more perfect and more synchronistic than, I mean, anything you can ever imagine. The pattern is freaking exquisite. So don't worry. Don't be afraid. Just accept your past.
That's such a brilliant and useful perspective on it. And
Thank you.
with that being said, I am curious if you think what your thoughts are on the actual ability, because of course we all know, and many have had experiences where it's like, oh, being projected into another time, space, past life memory, et cetera, and it's all sort of, or consciousness centric. And then we've all seen the Hollywood movies where someone physically travels, their body physically travels.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts on the potentiality of physically time traveling to another time and space?
Yeah. Well, there's a, a buck ton of causal violations that can occur when you start going down that rabbit hole. And meaning that, if you go to the past physically, and you change something that happened,
Yep.
then there's an effect, a ripple effect, where that event changes the next event, changes the next event, changes the next event, changes the next event, and so on and so forth. And so you can't actually come back to the present and it be the same.
Right.
There's just no way.
Right.
Like, things will be different, and the level of differences can be so drastic that, like, it's like completely inconsistent. And there's some brilliant media out there about this. I mean, Back to the Future was a smart one for sure.
Right.
But the Flash TV show plays with this a lot. And it's actually brilliantly done, because he's faced with the most intense choices you could possibly make, like saving his mother from being killed when he's a kid, and like, he's back in time, and it's like, well, of course he's going to save his mom, right? But then by actually influencing this moment in the past and changing it, he completely destroys all of what he knew of was the present,
Right.
and he's in this entirely different timeline. And it's it's horrible. It's really horrible. And so if you were a time master, and there's another show I think that plays on this a lot, which I've watched some of. And in this show, these guys are time travelers, and they travel around to different points in time, and they're basically trying to stop inconsistencies in the timeline.
Right.
But as you watch the show, it gets messier and messier and messier and messier and messier. I mean, it's like it, and this is like really revealing the truth about physical time travel, is that if you could see it, how you would actually do it, would you ever actually want to do it? Because you're going to get lost into your own parallel universes, your own
Yep.
parallel timelines. And who's to say whether or not the universe has fail-safe mechanisms where you're in a sense isolated to that in yourself, and that nobody else is actually experiencing a change or not,
Hmm.
or whether two can be fully split and then merge back and slam into each other. In any case, messes happen.
Right.
And, it's possible that we already have experienced some of the results of some experimentation with this that's created a mess.
Right.
And it's the phenomena that people call the Mandela effect, which they're going to make a movie about now.
Oh, are they?
Which is like, oh yeah, they're doing a whole film about it where it's like the whole universe is glitching and stuff.
The Bernstein
And
versus the Bernstein or whatever bears.
exactly. Yeah, I read the Berenstain Bears growing up. It was definitely not the Berenstain Bears. I had friends that ate Fruit Loops all the time, and I was at their house, and fruit was never spelled with two O's. It was fruit and then loops with the two O's. I mean, I remember the boxes perfectly. Like, so there's some weird stuff that's going on where our timeline may have been messed with. So I'm not going to deny the physicality of it, because as above, so below, and consciousness absolutely has the capacity to travel through time.
Yeah.
And, there are many ways that we as consciousness beings can work through and work with the consciousness of ourselves in the past or in the potential of the future, and actually help to shape our whole journey through time through mastering our own conscious experience of time. But when it comes to collective shifts of time by changing events in the past, man, it gets really, really, really messy. And so I imagine that I would probably rather prefer to say that I remember that there are beings who are, in many senses, guardians of time, and are basically in existence to help preserve timelines and ensure that people don't do shit that fucks up the timeline,
Right.
Because it's not good for anybody. And so I think there's a preservation effect. And I think that anytime there is a distortion or a branch in the timeline that's not connected to the full flow of the eternal past, like the river, even if we're collectively experiencing that branch or that lie, eventually that is going to snap back in. And when it does, it's going to bring even more of the truth through.
Right.
So I think even if you did change the past, even if you did physically do something to offset the timeline, there's going to be a correction,
a bill to pay
factor built in, because energy is going to want to return to equilibrium. That means time as well,
right?
Because energy equals MC squared, which is space-time is energy.
Yeah. Very, very interesting perspective. And, you touched on the time guardians, which gets into a little, even, time guardians that you're aware of, that gets into even a little bit stranger territory, which I love. And so that leads me to the question that I always like to ask people, any sort of story that is, positive paranormal or synchronicity or serendipitous story, anything like strange and, interesting that you'd care to share?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, there's there's kind of countless streams to choose from on that front, in my life at least. And yeah, moments of synchronicity and serendipity have really shaped the direction of my life in a huge way. When I was in college and living in Asheville, North Carolina, I was just going about my day, just having a normal day, just like you do. And I ended up at the grocery store, and I run into this guy who recognizes me. I don't know who he is. And he apparently knew my grandparents. He called himself Paul the Hula Man. And he's like, hey, like, I know your grandparents, and, I'm connected to these communities and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, do you, hey, I'm going up to cook for these indigenous elders at this land, and it's supposed to be fulfilling this sacred prophecy. Do you want to come up and cook with them with me? like
Wow.
out of the blue, right?
Wow.
Like I wasn't like a I wasn't like a sous chef or
Mm-hmm.
doing that at all. That was not even a part of my life. I was like just at the grocery store, just like buying some
Right.
eggs and stuff. And I'm like, gosh, I don't know. Let me think about it. He's like, okay, we'll come to this other event. We have this like enlightenment practice thing, and I want you to check it out. And so I go to the other event, and there, I do this practice, and they're basically questioning, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Like over and over again.
Right.
And you dive deeper and deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of that question, questioning the answer that you give yourself every time until you get to some state of self-realization. And it's really powerful meditation practice.
Mm.
And I met the guy who was leading it, and he was like, yeah, so there's this Hawaiian prophecy that says that the 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 tribes of the world will reunite when the elders gather at the land of the two twins in the eastern mountains.
Mm.
And he's like, and so these two twins that own this huge property up in Boone, and they're like billionaires, um, synchronistically met one of these indigenous elders, and they decided to have a gathering. And then the Hawaiian elder finds out about it because it gets passed, down the line through a
Yeah.
bunch of different indigenous families. And he's like, oh my God, this is fulfilling a prophecy.
Wow.
And so do you want to come up and cook for these indigenous elders and, help fulfill this prophecy? And I was like, yeah, of course, what are you going to do? Say like, nah, that's cool, man. Like,
Better
I'll come back for the
get
next
out your
prophecy in
best
1,000
lasagna
years or
recipe.
something. Yeah, exactly. So I go up there, and I'm in this room with like 100 elders from all over the world, from like from you know Great Lakes tribes, Wasak, to Hopi elders, to Orville Looking Horse and his family, chief of the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota Sioux nations, Northwestern tribes, tribes from Florida, tribes from and a few from Europe, a few from Asia, like lots of indigenous elders from all over the world. And I'm like one of the only young people there at all.
Yeah.
So it comes around to me. We're all introducing ourselves this night. We spend 4 or 5 hours, each person speaking a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to stand up, and it's like all of a sudden this like lightning charge just moves through me. And I say, I'm Adam Apollo, and I'm here to represent the youth of all of the tribes who are not represented here.
Mm.
And
Wow.
and it was just like, it just came out.
Right.
But as soon as I said it, they were like, they held me to that. Like I was literally the representative of all of the other tribes, and including my own people, like
Wow.
the Irish Tuatha De Danann lineage. And they wanted me in every fire ceremony, in every sweat lodge, with
Wow.
the elders, who are these Mayan day keepers who are calling in the Mayan time cycle changes and all this stuff that was going on. And I become close friends with these people, these elders. And my friend, who was the chef who I was trying to also cook with, was pretty frustrated with me by the end, because I couldn't be even in the kitchen a lot
Yeah.
of the time because I needed to be with the elders.
Wow.
But because of that, I then the um the keeper of the Hawaiian people's knowledge and stuff, Pu'uanuakeke Kanahele, who is descendant of King Kamehameha, like gives me this whalebone hook like necklace. And
Wow.
the Mayan daykeeper, passes to me this knowledge about how and why all the calendars are connected and synchronized. And that there is no right or wrong Mayan calendar. And I've been studying and teaching the dream spell for a while. And the Orville Looking Horse invites me to come and help his family do this prayer run for world peace. His son had just been in a car accident, and his daughter was trying to organize it by herself. And so I'm going to help her organize this whole East Coast group that's going to run from New York to the Black Hills of South Dakota for summer solstice, for the 10th annual World Peace Prayer Day ceremonies. And there's a West Coast group coming from the West Coast and a group coming from Canada and a group coming from Mexico. The next thing I know, I'm like in this organization of like helping to organize indigenous youth to run, from all around the country to this like huge event on the summer solstice. And I do. And this whole thing happens and I go on this journey and, we have a van explode and the next thing you
Jeez.
know, I'm in the Black Hills, like with like spirits of white animals, like swirling around this powerful ceremonial space.
Wow.
And then end up on the West Coast. And then I find out about Burning Man and I meet people that suddenly are remembering one of my past lives that I hadn't accepted yet. And the next thing I know, I'm given a Burning Man ticket and I go to Burning Man and I'm out in the middle of the desert and I go through this huge, healing experience of many, many, many lifetimes, all converging together. And that night all combined to me being way out in the middle of the desert and I made extraterrestrial contact. I
Whoa.
met a being from another star system.
What?
And I got reconnected with 73 ambassadors from different star systems around the galaxy.
Gosh.
And so all of this thing that changed my entire trajectory of my life, my work, my understanding, my context for where we're at, for where we're going, the past of the indigenous wisdom to the future of the galactic purpose that we have as humans to like come into full responsibility of our planet and caretake our planet as we go forth into this universe. All of it, was set off by this one moment of being in the grocery store and having this guy be like, hey,
Hey,
I
stranger.
recognize you. I knew you when you were a little kid,
Right. Wow.
So it's like, you never know. You
Yeah.
never know how powerful a single moment can be in changing your entire life and your destiny.
Wow. And I have a little bit of a tie-in to that synchronicity story. I don't remember if it came up or not when we were hanging out a few weeks ago, but all my roots, I'm originally from Virginia, but all my roots on my dad's side are from North Carolina. And so, going way back to like 1700s on his side. And I actually had a little bit of a synchronicity, like where I moved in Tennessee where I went to college with this guy. And it turns out, we didn't know that we were connected in any way. And then it turns out his grandfather had married my parents. And he was from this little nowhere town called Boone, North Carolina. So when you said Boone, I assume you're talking about Boone, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And very, very interesting.
There's some powerful vortexes up in them hills, man.
Yes.
Let me tell you.
I reckon it gets crazy up around there.
Those mountains are full of crystals, like you go to places like Shining Rock in the Blue Ridge Mountains and it's like literally chunks of quartz crystal the size of buses like sticking out of the ground.
Wow.
It's just the whole Appalachians, especially the southern Appalachians, are just giant ancient crystals.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wild. And so your extraterrestrial contact experience happened at Burning Man?
Yeah. My direct physical contact experience happened way out in the middle of the desert.
Oh, man.
Playa.
I would love to hear as we wind down, I know we're getting to it, any part of that story you want to share. That sounds like an interesting one.
Well, it's a lot to tell, and I don't usually get into it in too much depth without really giving people the context of the whole thing, because you have to understand how I got there and that it wasn't just like, a lot of people would just assume, oh, he must have just taken a bunch of drugs and went out and hallucinated some shit. But I was not on a bunch of drugs, and I did have a fucking powerful experience. And there was direct confirmations that I was not the only person who saw this being.
Wow.
But I was the person who had the honor of having the conversation with this being, with her. And I also, I went through major processes with it where I had to have validation of my
Mm-hmm.
experience as
Yeah.
I went,
Yeah.
because I'm too much of a scientist. I would just block shit out if I didn't think it was real.
Right.
Like
Right.
I
Right.
would just be like, okay, putting that in my own mental box over here. Okay. Like I know how to deal with the mind.
Yeah.
I've been working with it for a long time. And so I had to have physical confirmation. I had to have direct, solid things to land on. And so, after I had this experience, which my friend Ruben Langdon interviewed me for his show, Interviews with Ed, Interviews with Extra Dimensionals.
Mm.
And I tell the whole story in that show. So if your listeners want to check it out, I'm pretty sure the episode's going to be released. If it's not now, in the next month or two, something like that. And if they go to my website, adamapollo.com, it'll be posted on there, and you can, I'll send out a newsletter, of course, whenever that happens.
Cool.
But without going into all those details, one of my ways of testing this whole experience out, and my whole contact experience, and my Galactic Council experience, which for me was really about understanding where humanity is at, the journey that we're on, the major transition points that we need to go to and through in order to become a galactic civilization. And what does that look like? What does our trajectory look like? And are they here to help us or not? And the answer is yes, they are. And there's a whole community around this galaxy that is very strongly invested in seeing us make it through this, because they believe that we have a huge amount of wealth to bring to this galaxy in terms of our experience and knowledge and music and culture, and all the different kind of ways that culture has bubbled on this planet, as well as the life of Gaia. They want to help preserve this amazing library
Right.
that is here on this planet. And so there's a huge, vast interest in seeing us make it through this big transition phase. And the transition phase basically looks, it's every level of being. So there's sort of a component that relates to each chakra of our bodies, or each layer of our consciousness. But there's a few systemic level shifts that are highly critical, which I like to share with people, because when you really see these trim tabs, as Bucky would put it, how these little changes in the rudder can change the big rudder and
Mm-hmm.
change the direction of the whole submarine, the whole ship that we're on here as a planet. It's profound, and it helps people to realize that we're not just necessarily on the track towards another like post-apocalyptic age. We've
Yep.
already done that. That already
Yep.
happened, guys. Like the flood happened, civilization was lost, ice age ended, people had to start over from scratch. So if you've got a bunch of fears about that, it's because you already experienced that. You don't
Right.
have to do that again. We already did that. It's a different game now.
Right.
And the game that we're in now is one that's full of a lot of surprises.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, here's one. If you develop energy systems that run on the quantum vacuum fluctuations of space, what some people call 0 point energy,
Mm-hmm.
other people just call free energy devices, but it's not free. It's just part of space time. It's right there, and it's just accessible to us and able to be put to work with the right approach, the right formulas. What you do is, by localizing energy sources all over the world, you end the grid. You get rid of all of the telephone poles and all the wires.
Yep.
Everybody produces energy locally. You can desalinate water as much as you need to.
Yep.
So water becomes massive abundance. You're able to produce the electricity to grow food anywhere in the world. So you immediately can start eradicating hunger by growing things everywhere. Energy is abundant to do it. There's plenty of seeds in the world, and they grow, right? Like all you
Yep.
need is the right conditions to grow stuff, and food just pops out of everywhere. That's just the nature of the earth. So, all of those things, including the control systems, which are managing the energy system of the planet and are some of the largest war machines on the planet, which are going for oil, all of those things start cascading and rippling and changing, right?
Right.
And then the next level is replication systems. So, we all hear about 3D printers, right? and we're printing all this cool stuff in 3D. I mean, we're even printing food in 3D now. Like, it's really weird, but you can actually print a hamburger with this like weird device, you know?
Wild.
And we're building gemstones and diamonds, single molecules at a time. But the next level of that is literally the way it's done in Star Trek, where you're literally assembling the entire molecular structure, the Planck scale information structure copy of an object. And once you can do that, then suddenly there's no resource limitations. We don't have to mine to get certain metals anymore.
Right.
We can produce whatever materials we want. Gold doesn't have a bigger value than anything else because you can make gold as much as you need to.
Yep.
And so our material valuation of things changes, which completely transforms the entire economic system and also makes it free with free energy and replication. You can produce whatever you need to feed whatever people or whatever technologies for whatever places, and it costs nothing. And
Right.
so now you think about like the entire economic system being turned on its head, where value is not ascribed to material anymore. It's ascribed to information. It's
Mm.
ascribed to the way that you make a cappuccino, not a cappuccino. Like,
Mm.
it's not about having a cup of coffee. It's about who grew the beans, how are they grown, how are they roasted, who steamed the milk, what kind of milk was it, what kind of sugar or honey was used. And it's that art of creating something that becomes valuable. And
Right.
more we're already transitioning to that. We're seeing the sort of tendrils of this shift already moving through our collective culture. And then the third big technological transformation is gravitational control, which means once you can control gravity, you can bend space-time in a way that lets you travel faster than light and jump to other locations, which means there's no more space limitation. That means there's no more battle over, this is my area, this is my little plot of land, that's yours, you know, like all these people that are homeless, all these people that are fighting for this tiny freaking apartment in the middle of the city to work or whatever, like all of that becomes obsolete because
Mm.
the next biggest thing, of course, is going to be people wanting to travel to other worlds and
Mm.
explore other planets and see what it's like to live on Mars, see what it's like to live in the Pleiades, see what it's
Right.
like to live in Arcturus, and meeting all of these other beings out there. So it's freeing the population density from the planet, which has its own massive environmental ramifications, allowing us to kind of rebuild cities in a way that's not centric around streets. Right. So we don't have to have concrete streets everywhere because we can travel way easier than that. We can be in the air. We can portal. We can Stargate, you know, shipping changes, all of the transfer of goods and services, all of that changes overnight. And so with those three pieces of tech, with a foundation of open source being underneath it, where these are things that should be accessible to anyone and anywhere,
Yeah.
suddenly now there's this sort of massive change that the planet goes through, and it happens in a very short period of time. And that changes the entire future that we can see. It lets us heal the ecosystem that we've built. It lets us start, you know, taking carbon out of the atmosphere. It lets us start expanding and traveling and stop using, you know, gas propulsion engines. Like, there's just so many effects of this. But to do that and to build those technologies, we have to go through a spiritual transformation. And that's what's happening right now, is that we're waking up, we're starting to accept the truth, we're starting to realize our own lineage of math and sciences that unlocked some of these things for us in a prior age. And we're reclaiming that to apply it now in a responsible way that we can do this whole thing. We can make this whole change. We can shift the entire journey of the planet with our love,
Mm.
and do that with the realization that we are part of this infinite field that is the universe, that we are part of this journey that is space-time, and we can't be separate from it.
Mm.
It's who we are.
Yeah.
And all these technologies are our birthright because they're already part of our consciousness. And now it's just time to externalize that and make it available to everyone.
Yeah. Well said. How if you had to take a, you know, a guess as to how long until all of that is happening? What would you say? What's the first off the top of your head answer?
It's happening right now, man. But the next 10 to 15 years are going to be real exciting. There's a lot of labs that are well on the way of development of these different pieces of tech. And in my own work, I'm building a next level distributed social learning platform, which is designed to really maximize our capacity to share information in an open source way with each other around the world, and free us from these giant silos that are owning our data and abusing us and abusing our information awareness by shaping the news that we receive, and kind of forcing us into further and further boxes of division. And so we're gonna pop the whole veil off the whole thing and let people really see what the whole world looks like, what the big picture actually is, and pierce all the false stories. And so it's on.
It's on. I love
it's
it.
on.
Yeah.
Welcome to 2020, people.
Welcome to 2020. The soaring 20s have arrived.
That's right. That's right.
Oh man, so good, Adam. You are amazing. What is the best way for people that want to connect and follow your work and all that to do so?
Yeah, well, if you just Google my name, Adam Apollo, there's a lot of stuff that you'll come up with there. My website, adamapollo.com, is probably the best resource to just kind of see what I'm up to, see the different projects that I work with and things that that are part of my life. And there's lots of videos on there and audio media that you can listen to, and tons of old writings. I've just been transferring these old libraries from like 2000 to 2005 over to the site. So it's full of a bunch of very, very old poetry and posts and stuff, but it's it's juicy stuff. And it feels like it's a time right now for us to really integrate our past, right? Like really bring the gifts that we've had in the past back into the present moment. So it's a lot of what I try to do through that. I also have a quantum geometry course coming out in the Resonance Academy. And that's should be opening up at the end of this month. So
Cool.
you just search Resonance Academy, as in vibrational resonance, and quantum geometry course, and you'll find it. And it's a really beautiful deep dive into the actual geometric structure of space-time, and the way it relates to consciousness and how the different forces are connected. So it's a fun one, and I hope to have you guys come and join me.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, I do have one last question here for you, Adam,
All right.
and it is my cliche last question. It is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Adam Apollo? 60 seconds is plenty of time.
Yeah, let's see. I'll take 15 just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why are we here?
Mm-hmm.
We're here to know ourselves. The whole journey, everything that happens to us, every moment that emerges is here to teach us more about who we are. And the more we see who we are, and the more we accept who we are, and really get to know all of the facets of ourself, our light, our dark, our shadow, our beauty, our pain, the more we get to know everyone else too. And we get to really see people for who they are and for their journey. And we stop judging and seeing good and evil as this hard line. We just see actions coming from trauma or shadow, and actions coming from clarity and truth and responsibility and self-ownership. And so we begin to choose more of the latter and choose to be responsible for ourselves and to treat others in the way they deserve to be treated. And through that, we become guardians of sovereignty, guardians of destiny, guardians of truth, guardians of love.
Bam. You are amazing, my friend. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom. Bro. And I look forward to the next time our paths cross in 3D, 5D, wherever it may be. And yeah, this has been great.
Thanks, man. Yeah, come visit us anytime. And yeah, it's great to see you. And I'll let you know next time I come up through LA. And thank
Yep.
you. And
Yeah. I'd love to have you on
blessings for the fellowship.
optimistic. Have you on optimistic as well.
Sounds
yeah,
fun.
yeah. I feel like there's a lot deeper down this rabbit hole I could explore with you. So we shall do it.
All right. Sounds good. I'll follow the white rabbit and I'll see you there.
All right, my friend. Till next time, all of you out there listening, journey well. Love you so, so much.
Thank you. Blessings.